Hey, welcome back to Wired Logic. Before we start, I need to give you a disclaimer. Everything you're about to learn today is 100% legal to know. But honestly, after you understand these 10 psychological facts, you're going to feel like you've discovered a cheat code for human behavior. These are the kinds of insights that major companies spend millions researching, manipulators use to exploit people, and authority figures hope you never figure out. And the wildest part? They're all rooted in actual scientific research. So if you're ready to understand the invisible forces that control human decisions, make people trust you instantly, and influence outcomes in your favor, keep watching. Because the final fact in this video is so powerful that once you know it, you'll never look at human interaction the same way again. Let's dive in. Fact number 1, the Reciprocity Trap. Here's something that's been hardwired into human psychology for thousands of years. If someone does something nice for you, your brain literally feels obligated to do something nice back. This isn't just politeness. This is a deeply ingrained psychological principle called reciprocity, and it's so powerful that it bypasses your conscious decision-making entirely. Here's how it works. When someone gives you something of value, even something small, your brain automatically puts them in a positive light and creates what researchers call a debt of gratitude. Your mind subconsciously thinks, okay, this person helped me. Now I owe them something. And the crazy part is that this response is involuntary. You don't consciously decide to feel obligated. It just happens. Cialdini's research in his book, Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion, showed that when subjects were given a small soda before being asked to buy raffle tickets, their purchase rate skyrocketed. The gift created an obligation. They weren't even conscious of the manipulation happening. Sales professionals exploit this constantly. This is why companies send you free samples. Why salespeople take you out to lunch before closing a deal. Why charities send you personalized address labels with their donation requests. They're not being generous. They're strategically triggering your reciprocity reflex to make you feel like you owe them something. The real cheat code here is understanding that this works in reverse too. If you give value first, without expecting anything in return, people will naturally want to give something back to you. Whether it's trust, loyalty, or compliance with a request you haven't even made yet. It's automatic. It's neurological. And once you know about it, you see it everywhere. Fact number 2, why your first impression of value controls everything. Think about the last time you saw a price tag that had a line through it. Maybe you saw a shirt originally marked at $99 on sale for $49. You probably thought you were getting an amazing deal, right? That's not because you're getting a good price. It's because of a psychological phenomenon called anchoring, and it's essentially a legal illusion. Here's what's happening in your brain. When you see that first number, $99, your mind uses it as an anchor point. It becomes your reference point for everything that follows. When you then see $49, your brain doesn't evaluate $49 as a logical price. Instead, it evaluates it relative to that anchor. It compares it to the first number you saw, and it doesn't just work with prices. Anchoring affects every single decision you make. Psychological studies have shown that if you ask someone to guess how many African countries are in the United Nations, and you first spin a wheel that lands on a high number, their guess will be much higher than if the wheel had landed on a low number. The number they saw first literally anchored their thinking. This is why salary negotiation is such a critical moment in any job offer. The first number mentioned in a salary discussion becomes the anchor for everything else. If the employer says $90,000 first, the entire negotiation orbits around that number. If you say $120,000 first, suddenly $90,000 sounds low by comparison. Car dealerships do this all the time. They show you a luxury vehicle at a premium price first. Then they offer you a less expensive option. Suddenly, that mid-range car feels like a bargain, even if it's overpriced relative to actual market value. The first price anchor made everything else seem more reasonable. The psychological study of anchoring has been replicated hundreds of times with consistent results. Your brain weighs initial information far more heavily than subsequent information when making decisions. Once that anchor is set, moving away from it feels like you're getting a worse deal, even when objectively you might not be. Fact number 3, the herd behavior exploit. Here's a fact that might actually disturb you. Your brain cares infinitely more about what other people are doing than it cares about what's actually true. This psychological principle is called social proof, and it's the reason why laugh tracks on sitcoms actually make you laugh more, even though you consciously know they're manipulating you. Social proof is the tendency to assume that if lots of other people are doing something, thinking something, or believing something, then it must be correct. It's a mental shortcut your brain uses to navigate an impossibly complex world. Instead of evaluating every piece of information independently, you outsource your decision-making to the crowd. Think about YouTube. You see a video with 50,000 views and 2,000 likes. You click on it because it must be good, right? All those people can't be wrong. Then you see another video with 200 views and 5 likes. Even if both videos are exactly the same quality, you're biased toward the one with more views. Why? Because other people have already validated it. This is the entire psychological foundation of influencer marketing. A brand doesn't have to actually make a good product. They just need to find someone with millions of followers and have them endorse it. Millions of people see that endorsement and think, well, this person with millions of followers recommends it, so it must be good. Boom. Sales increase. Social proof activated. The terrifying part is how obvious this becomes once you understand it. Every testimonial you see, every 5-star review, every #1 bestseller label, these are all social proof mechanisms designed to exploit your herd mentality. And the scariest part? Social proof is so powerful that it can override your own experience. Psychological research has shown that if you put people in a room where everyone else is saying something obviously false, a significant percentage of people will publicly agree with the group, even though they privately know the group is wrong. They literally suppress what their own eyes and ears are telling them to conform to the group consensus. Fact number 4, how small commitments control your behavior. Here's a psychological principle that will change how you view every sales conversation, political campaign, and request you ever receive. It's called the foot in the door technique, and it's so effective that understanding it might make you paranoid about your own decision-making. The principle is simple but devastating. If you can get someone to agree to a small request first, they're dramatically more likely to agree to a much larger request later. And here's the crazy part. The person doesn't even realize they've been manipulated into a behavioral pattern. Here's how it works. A charity calls you and says, "Would you be willing to donate $5 to help underprivileged children?" That's easy. $5. No big deal. You say yes. But that tiny yes sets off a psychological cascade. Your brain has now categorized you as someone who donates to this charity. You've made a commitment, even if it's small. Now, 2 months later, the same charity calls you again. They don't ask for $5. They ask for $50. And because you've already committed to being a donor, your brain is much more likely to say yes. You've already crossed the psychological threshold. You've identified with the role. Backing out now feels inconsistent with your self-image. This is called the commitment and consistency principle. Once you commit to something, even something trivial, your brain experiences cognitive dissonance if you act inconsistently with that commitment. It feels wrong. It feels hypocritical. So you're motivated to maintain consistency, even if it costs you money, time, or energy. Research published in the Journal of Social Psychology studied this exact phenomenon. Participants were asked to do a small favor first. Then they were asked to do a much larger favor. The group that did the small favor first was significantly more likely to agree to the larger favor, compared to a control group that was simply asked directly. Here's where it gets really sinister. Once you've made that first commitment, the magnitude of the second request doesn't matter as much as you'd think. You're not rationally evaluating the second request on its own merits. You're evaluating whether it fits with your self-image as someone who's already committed to the cause. Retailers know this. They get you to buy a small item, and suddenly you're their customer. Then they upsell you. Then they bundle things. Then they offer a membership. Each step feels small relative to the commitment you've already made, but the cumulative cost is enormous. Fact number 5. How one positive trait blinds you to reality. Here's a cognitive bias that explains why we're drawn to attractive people, famous people, and people who seem confident. It's called the halo effect, and it's basically your brain's laziness exploit. The halo effect is when one positive characteristic about a person influences your judgment about their other characteristics. One good quality creates a glowing halo that illuminates everything else about them. The most obvious example is physical attractiveness. Studies have shown that attractive people are rated as more intelligent, more trustworthy, more competent, and more likable, even though physical attractiveness has zero correlation with intelligence or trustworthiness. But your brain doesn't care about logic. If someone is attractive, it assumes they're also better in every other way. Here's a study that perfectly demonstrates this. Researchers showed people 2 resumes that were identical in every way. Same qualifications, same experience, same achievements. But one resume had a photo of an attractive person attached, and one had a photo of an unattractive person attached. The attractive person's resume was rated significantly higher in every category, despite the content being identical. But physical attractiveness is just one example. The halo effect works with any positive trait. If someone is charismatic, you assume they're intelligent. If someone is a famous actor, you assume they know about politics. If someone is a billionaire, you assume they have all the answers to life's problems. This is why celebrities become spokespeople for products they have no actual expertise in. Why we listen to actors discuss politics. Why we trust attractive news anchors, even when they're reporting information from an autocue written by someone else. The halo effect creates what psychologists call a stereotype, but it's worse than a regular stereotype because it's positively biased. Instead of judging someone's competence in one area and then correcting for their competence in other areas, the halo effect makes you assume that if they're good at one thing, they're probably good at everything. This becomes especially dangerous when a person has one major positive trait that blinds you to multiple negative traits. A charismatic CEO might be able to hide financial incompetence behind their charm. A brilliant scientist might hold completely irrational personal beliefs that you overlook because of their halo. A talented athlete might exploit people, and you overlook it because of the halo they've built in your mind. Fact number 6, why you can't actually change your mind. This next fact is going to feel uncomfortable because it reveals something deeply unflattering about human cognition. We like to think we're rational beings who evaluate information objectively. We're not. We're confirmation bias machines. Confirmation bias is the tendency to search for, interpret, favor, and recall information in a way that confirms your pre-existing beliefs. Once you've decided something is true, your brain becomes a filter that lets in information that supports that belief and blocks out information that contradicts it. Here's how it works. Let's say you believe that a particular politician is corrupt. Now you see a news article about that politician, but your brain doesn't evaluate the article on its merits. It evaluates it relative to your existing belief. If the article supports the corruption narrative, you think, yes, this is evidence. If the article contradicts the narrative, you think, well, this is obviously biased reporting or cover-up. You're not being irrational. You're being confirmation biased. Your brain is unconsciously filtering all incoming information through the lens of your existing beliefs. The scariest part? Confirming an existing belief actually strengthens it, even if the confirmation is weak or questionable. Studies have shown that people who are exposed to weak evidence supporting their existing belief end up believing it even more strongly than people who saw no new evidence at all. This has massive implications for relationships, politics, and personal growth. If you believe your partner is untrustworthy, you'll notice every time they're 5 minutes late and interpret it as evidence of betrayal. You'll ignore the 100 times they were on time. Your brain is pattern matching to confirm your existing belief. If you believe that a particular diet works, you'll notice every pound you lose and attribute it to the diet. You'll ignore the fact that you're also exercising more or sleeping better. Your confirmation bias toward the diet. So any evidence that's consistent with diet effectiveness gets amplified and any evidence against it gets minimized. Here's the worst part. Psychologists have shown that when people with opposing beliefs are presented with the same objective evidence, they actually end up with stronger, more polarized beliefs than they had before. The evidence doesn't unite them. It divides them further, because each side is interpreting the same evidence through the lens of confirmation bias. Your brain is not a truth-seeking machine. It's a belief-protecting machine. And once you understand that, you realize that most disagreements aren't about the evidence. They're about whose evidence filter is stronger. Fact number 7. How crowds make you ignore emergencies. Imagine this scenario. A woman collapses on a subway train and needs medical help immediately. If she's alone with one other person, that person has a 70% chance of helping her. But if there are 5 other people on the train, that person has only a 40% chance of helping. This is the bystander effect, and it's one of the darkest psychological phenomena because it reveals that our moral instincts literally disappear in crowds. The bystander effect is the tendency for individuals to be less likely to help in an emergency if there are other people present. And it's not because people are inherently selfish. It's because of a cognitive mechanism called diffusion of responsibility. When you're the only person around, you feel 100% responsible for the outcome. You have to help, or you have to live with the guilt. But when there are other people around, your responsibility gets distributed across the group. In your mind, someone else will help. That's not your job. You're off the hook. Here's what's even more disturbing. Your brain doesn't think about this consciously. You don't think, well, there are 5 other people here, so I'm only 1/5 responsible. Your brain just feels less urgency. The crowd creates psychological distance between you and the emergency. This effect has been replicated in countless studies. The more bystanders present during an emergency, the longer it takes for anyone to help. It's a direct inverse relationship. More people equals slower response times equals worse outcomes. But here's where it gets really relevant to your life. The bystander effect doesn't just apply to emergencies. It applies to any situation where a group could take action. If your company is doing something unethical and everyone else is ignoring it, you're more likely to ignore it too. Not because you've rationally decided it's okay, but because your responsibility feels diffused across the group. If your friend group has a person who's being treated badly and everyone else is ignoring it, you're more likely to ignore it too. The bystander effect makes you assume that if everyone else is comfortable with it, it's probably fine. This is why mass atrocities happen. Not because everyone is evil, but because everyone assumes someone else is responsible for stopping it. The bystander effect is the psychological mechanism that turns normal people into complicit observers. Fact number 8. How repetition makes you love things you should hate. Here's something that's so psychologically insidious that it's probably influencing you right now without your knowledge. The more you see something, the more you like it, even if the thing itself is mediocre or objectively bad. This is called the mere exposure effect. The mere exposure effect is the psychological tendency to develop a preference for things merely because you're familiar with them. It's not about the quality of the thing. It's purely about familiarity. Familiarity breeds liking. Here's a classic study that demonstrates this. Researchers showed subjects a series of faces. Some faces appeared frequently, and some appeared only once. Later, when subjects were asked which faces they liked most, they consistently chose the faces they'd seen most often, even though the faces were all equally attractive. The faces that appeared more frequently were simply liked more because they were more familiar. This is the entire psychological foundation of advertising and branding. Companies don't need to convince you that their product is good. They just need to make sure you see their brand name constantly. Every billboard, every social media ad, every product placement on a TV show, it's repetition. And the repetition isn't to inform you. It's to make you like the brand through familiarity. Think about the brands you prefer, not the brands you think are objectively better. The brands you actually prefer. There's a good chance it's the brand you've been exposed to most frequently. You've been mere exposure affected into brand loyalty. But here's where it gets really manipulative. The mere exposure effect even works for ideas and opinions. The more you hear a particular opinion repeated, the more true it seems. The more you see a particular narrative repeated, the more valid it seems. This is the psychological foundation of propaganda and misinformation. Studies have shown that when false statements are repeated frequently, they eventually seem true to people, even if they know the statements are false. The repetition literally changes what feels true in your mind. This is also why the same political soundbite gets repeated constantly in campaigns. It's not because they expect you to rationally evaluate the soundbite. It's because they're using mere exposure to make it feel true through repetition. Fact number 9. How artificial scarcity hijacks your decision-making. You're probably familiar with this one, but you might not understand just how deeply it manipulates your behavior. When something appears to be rare or about to disappear, your brain literally stops thinking rationally. The scarcity principle states that opportunities seem more valuable when their availability is limited, and limited time makes it even worse. If you see only 3 left in stock, your brain releases stress hormones. Your decision-making shifts into emergency mode. Here's what's happening neurologically. Your brain has evolved to perceive scarcity as a threat. For most of human evolution, scarcity meant genuine survival risk. If food was scarce, you had to act fast or you'd starve. If good shelter was scarce, you had to claim it immediately. So your brain has hardwired mechanisms that respond to scarcity by suppressing rational thought and promoting immediate action. This was useful for survival, but now it's being exploited constantly. Limited time offer. Only 3 slots available. This price ends tonight. These aren't informational statements. They're psychological triggers designed to make you act without thinking. Here's what makes it really insidious. Scarcity doesn't have to be real to trigger the response. Artificial scarcity works just as well as real scarcity. A company can simply claim that something is limited, and your brain will respond with the same stress hormones and urgency-driven decision-making. Think about ticket sales for concerts or events. The company literally manufactures scarcity by releasing tickets in waves, creating urgency even though they have all the tickets available. They could sell them all at once, but instead they create artificial scarcity to trigger your fear of missing out. Online retailers do this constantly. Only 5 left at this price. Maybe there actually are only 5. Maybe there are 5,000, and they're just lying to trigger your scarcity response. The scary part is how well this works. When urgency and scarcity are combined, your rational decision-making is essentially offline. You're operating on pure lizard brain fear of missing out. Fact number 10. Why you obey harmful orders from authority figures. All right, this is the final fact, and this is the one that absolutely shocked me when I first learned about it. This is the fact that feels most illegal to know because it explains how ordinary people become complicit in terrible things. In the 1960s, psychologist Stanley Milgram conducted a series of experiments that fundamentally changed our understanding of human behavior. The experiment was deceptively simple. Participants believed they were taking part in a study about learning and memory. They were told that they would be asking a learner questions, and if the learner answered incorrectly, they would administer electric shocks. They wouldn't actually be administering real electric shocks, but they didn't know that. As the experiment progressed, the experimenter would instruct participants to increase the voltage of the shocks. The learner would scream, pound on the wall, beg the participant to stop, but the experimenter, dressed in a white lab coat with a clipboard, would calmly say, "You have no choice. You must continue." And here's what shocked everyone. 65% of participants continued administering shocks all the way to the maximum voltage, even though the learner appeared to be in severe distress. They didn't want to. They were visibly uncomfortable. But the authority figure, the experimenter in the lab coat, told them to continue. So they continued. This is authority bias, the tendency to attribute greater accuracy to the opinions and instructions of an authority figure and be more influenced by that authority's commands. But here's what makes this even more disturbing. When Milgram repeated the experiment with slight variations, he discovered something. If the experimenter left the room and just gave instructions over the phone, compliance dropped dramatically. If the learner was in the same room as the participant, compliance increased because the authority figure's presence was more powerful. If the authority figure wore a regular shirt instead of a lab coat, compliance dropped. In other words, the authority didn't have actual power. The authority's outfit, location, and perceived status created the illusion of power, and people obeyed that illusion. This explains so much about human behavior. Why we follow orders from the government, even when we disagree with them. Why we take medical advice from doctors without question, even when we could research it ourselves. Why we follow the instructions of our boss, even when we know the instructions are wrong. We have a psychological drive to obey authority figures. And it's not because authority figures are actually wiser or more trustworthy. It's because we've been conditioned since childhood to respect authority. Teachers, parents, police, uniforms. And here's the manipulation. All a person needs to do is project authority. They need to appear confident, dress professionally, use the right language, and your brain will automatically assume they know what they're talking about. This is how con artists work. This is how fake doctors operate. This is how unqualified people rise to positions of power. Because they understand that humans are authority biased. They've figured out how to project authority, and millions of people will follow their instructions without question. But wait, there's more to this story, and this is where it gets really dark. Milgram conducted a follow-up study. He had participants go through the obedience experiment again. But this time, he told them beforehand that some participants had refused to continue. He showed them that other people had stood up to the authority figure. When participants learned that it was possible to disobey and that other people had done it, the obedience rate dropped by more than 50%. In other words, the authority bias isn't just about the authority figure's power. It's also about social consensus. If you believe that everyone else is obeying the authority, you're more likely to obey. But if you know that other people are questioning the authority, you're suddenly able to think for yourself. This is the permission structure. Authority bias creates compliance. But seeing other people resist the authority breaks the spell. It gives you permission to think independently. And here's what connects this to everything I've taught you in this video. All of these psychological principles work together. Scarcity creates urgency. Urgency suppresses rational thinking. Authority tells you what to do. Social proof tells you that everyone else is complying. Confirmation bias makes you filter out information that contradicts the authority. And suddenly, you're doing something you would never have done if you'd been thinking clearly. This is exactly how atrocities happen. Not because people are evil, but because ordinary people's psychological biases combine to create compliance with harmful systems. And the people benefiting from those systems understand psychology. They've weaponized it. The most powerful thing you can do is understand these principles, because understanding them is the first step to resisting them. When you know about authority bias, you can question authority. When you know about social proof, you can think independently even if everyone else is doing something. When you know about confirmation bias, you can actively seek out information that contradicts your beliefs. So there you have it. 10 psychological facts that change everything about how you understand human behavior. These aren't obscure theories. They're the actual mechanisms that control decisions, influence relationships, and determine outcomes in your life. The question now is, what are you going to do with this knowledge? Are you going to understand these principles so you can recognize when they're being used on you? Or are you going to use them to understand yourself better and make smarter decisions? If this video changed how you think about psychology and human behavior, please drop a like. And if you want more deep dives into the psychological principles that control our lives, subscribe to Wired Logic and hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single video. Thank you for watching. And remember, understanding psychology isn't about manipulating others. It's about understanding yourself well enough that you can't be easily manipulated.